Good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Doug Buchanan, Editor-in-Chief of Columbus Business First, and I'm also a proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees and Chair of the Program Committee, which helps CMC choose its forum topics. I'm so pleased you're all with us for today's forum, the annual State of the Workforce. Thank you to our sponsors today, J.P. Morgan Chase, Charter Communications, and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. And thank you to our host, the Ellis, for its generous support. We're also grateful to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting our live stream, which is being carried on all of our social media platforms. Let's thank everyone for supporting today's forum. Okay, on to the forum. Can hidden workers alleviate Ohio's current workforce woes? According to a recent Dayton Daily news report, Ohio has an enviable challenge: 2 job openings for every unemployed worker. So-called hidden workers might be part of the solution. They are eager to jump into the labor pool, but they find themselves blocked by prejudice, balky application processes, inflexible schedules, poor transportation, language struggles, and other barriers. Today, we will learn how Central Ohio businesses can open the employment door to these workers who are ready to rejoin the workforce. To introduce today's speakers, please welcome Aaliyah Bradley, Executive Director of Asset Wealth Management Recruiting with our sponsor, J.P. Morgan Chase. Aaliyah, welcome.
Thank you so very much, Doug. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Aaliyah Bradley, and I work for J.P. Morgan Chase. And a revision to my title is I lead DE&I sourcing, events, and engagement. J.P. Morgan Chase is committed to supporting the workforce, not only in Ohio, but every community that we support globally. One of our efforts is a second chance efforts that is good not only for our economics, it's good for our families, and it's good for our employers. We're making significant progress reducing barriers of employment by banning the box and helping advocate successfully for policy changes. In 2022 alone, we hired 4,600 individuals with criminal backgrounds, which is approximately 10% of the new hires in the United States. There is much work to be done, though. As a founding member of the Second Chance Business Coalition, we continue to help get more involved in businesses involved by hiring and supporting communities with or individuals with criminal backgrounds. I am so proud of J.P. Morgan Chase's investment and support. However, understanding that 1 in 3 individuals in America have a criminal background, that is 70 million people, shows that our workforce needs more work to ensure that we have created career pathways for all. We are always committed in hiring the best, the most qualified for each of our roles, but we do believe that removing these barriers provides us an opportunity to allow finding these talented individuals, but we need more individuals, more support from organizations and companies such as yourselves. So welcome everyone to the most important CMC conversation that you may attend this year. You have before you a panel of brilliant and bold leaders who I hope will educate us in our thinking and inspire each and every one of us to find a place in supporting our workforce. So now, please join me in welcoming today's esteemed speakers. We have Brent Orwell, who is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. We have Lisa Pat McDaniel, who is the CEO of Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, and our host and my friend, Archie Williamson, who is the founder of the CEO of Diversified Systems. As previously mentioned, please, if you would like to know more about our panelists today, scan the QR codes on your table. Archie, we look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Leah. First, I want to invite Brent to set the stage to talk about like a mini keynote reflecting on the state of Ohio's workforce.
Thank you, Archie, and thank you, Leah, and all of you coming here today. I'm very honored to be asked to address this topic, which, I mean, to me, it's always an irony that we never talk about workforce until the economy is roaring along, and then when we're in a recession, it disappears. as an issue because we've got all of a sudden a lot of the labor supply problems get solved for us by a recession. And so this issue is having its moment. How do we find the hidden workers? That people who could be in the workforce, arguably should be in the workforce and are not in the workforce. And then how do we, once we find them, how do we figure out what's keeping them from coming into the workforce, reduce those barriers, increase the incentives for them, and then get them actually back on the job? So I'm going to talk, I thought it would be very helpful just to sort of, to frame this conversation, talk a little bit about what I regard as the three most important factors facing the workforce. The first one is demographics. And you can go ahead and advance the slide. Our population is slowing. Population growth is slowing. It's a little hard for me to see my own slides from here, so I'm going to stand up. Worldwide and in the U.S., population growth has really slowed, and that's beginning to show up in our workforce numbers. Between 2000 and 2005, we had 12 million people in this country join the workforce. Between 2017 and 2022, it grew by only 1.7 million. This raises the question where everybody's very anxious about automation and about generative AI and all of those issues. The real question we may be facing is not whether we have too much automation, but whether we will not have enough automation to make up for the shortage of workers that we're facing. You go ahead and advance. So where is this worker shortage coming from? The single most important factor is the decline in male labor force participation. That chart at the bottom shows basically from the late 50s, early 60s to the present in terms of male participation in the labor force. And you can see that it has been a long, steady, sometimes slow, sometimes faster, decline in male labor force participation. In the 1960s, if you were between the ages of 18 and 55, 90% of men were in the workforce. Today, we're down into the high 70s, low 80s, and that's a big problem for our economy. What happened to the men? Second big issue is the retirement boom. That's the chart on the right. You can see that during the pandemic, we essentially had 2 years worth of retirements in 1 year. As people who were close to retirement age called it quits. You know, it was too dangerous. Maybe their 401ks were up and they didn't need to, you know, it's like, I'll just retire a few years before I plan to. But that's also exerted a lot of pressure on the labor market as those retirees have unexpectedly left the market, left the labor force. The other thing is the effect of the pandemic. And we're very blessed that we can all be here together. It's great to be able to do that. And it makes us forget that pandemics are never really over. They leave marks, and one of the marks they leave is on the labor force. We've got hundreds of thousands of people now with long COVID who are going to have a very difficult time navigating a return to the workforce. Next slide. So I said there were these three factors. The first is demographics. The second is technology, and particularly artificial intelligence and the way that it is ramping up, powering up inside the economy. This chart shows the blue bars are where we were in November with ChatGPT. The green bars show the improvement between GPT-3 and 4. And you can see that just in a few months, in some areas, these are all standardized tests, types of standardized tests across the bottom. In some areas, the improvement was exponential. The one that's circled there is the unified bar exam. And I would not have used ChatGPT to appeal a parking ticket. at 3.5, I think I could go to the Supreme Court with GPT-4. So you can see how much better it's gotten. So this is creating a lot of anxiety. 80% of all jobs are exposed to AI, meaning that some of the tasks of those jobs are going to be changed. 20% are fully automatable. Like they go away. And the irony to all of this is that AI actually hits harder at the top of the skills curve rather than at the bottom. The more education you have, the more likely your job will have components that will be automated. Go on to the next. So this is the skills part of the triangle that I wanted to talk about. We have demographics, technology, now skills. This is from a study that IBM did that shows the change between 2016 and 2023 and what CEOs say are the most critical skills. And you can see in this chart, this just came out a couple of weeks ago, STEM skills in 2016 were at the very top. They've now dropped to 12th place in terms of what CEOs are looking for. And then at the top, you have what are called soft or non-cognitive skills that have gone from the middle importance way up to the top. And this is what employers are saying is their greatest need, the things that are most important moving into the future. You can go on to the next one. So this brings us to what do we do about that? And I call this a skills double helix. Technical skills are the kinds of skills that you go into a classroom and you sit down and you learn. And that's where we put most of our time, effort, energy, money is into training people with those kinds of skills. But we just learned from the employers that it's actually these non-cognitive skills that are the top priority. And they are not things that you learn in classrooms typically. Those are things that you learn in life. And they effectively add up. Those non-cognitive skills are the skill to learn new skills, and that is the skill for the future. That's as much as we can say right now. There's too much change. We don't know what kinds of skills are going to be needed, but what we do know in that environment is that we need to have people who can learn new things, and that is the most important skill that we can have. You can go on to the next. If you want to learn more about any of our work, this is the webpage, aei.org / Workforce Futures Initiative. And this was a project that AEI, the Brookings Institution, and the Harvard Kennedy School did together and are doing together. Lots of good research there if you're interested.
Great job, thank you. So Lisa, to kind of piggyback off of that, what do people require in order to build the right capacity, skills for prosperity moving forward?
Well, I mean, I would completely agree with you that the skill is the skill to learn new skills. And we've talked about this in workforce, this continuous ability to continuously learn. The other C's like communication and critical thinking, the ability to collaborate in teams. But continuous learning is got to be the skill that we instill in people, young people coming up, and we got to convince older workers that they have, and that they have to be willing, I think, to jump off and learn those new skills. And in the past, we all know the stereotype, right, of the person who retires because the newest system comes in and they're like, yeah, I'm not learning this. Time to retire. But we can't have that. From what I see, is we need to retain those workers as well, and we need to make it easy and to assist them towards the end of their career also to learn and to understand that they have the skill to learn new skills. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's in psychology they call it cognitive flexibility, right? Like as we age, learning becomes harder. It's much harder to learn a foreign language at 20 than it is at 5 or younger. You can, our brains are less plastic than as we age, and that means taking up new technology is really quite difficult. And so we have to set an expectation, I think, that the job market is going to change, that your job is going to change, and it's going to require you to be able to do new things, and that cultivating kind of that spirit of openness to change and flexibility around change is important. And I'll tell you, I've got a couple research assistants who are in their 20s. They don't want to learn it either. They don't want to learn AI. It's like, I got too much other stuff to do. You want me? When am I supposed to learn how to do this? It's like, you got to dive in. You got to just try. You've got to try to pick this stuff up because, like it or not, it is going to be in your life for the rest of your life.
Would you agree that employers, on the employer side, also then have to support that time and investment to help people be open to change, be open to learning those new skills, so that some of the fear is taken away in having to learn it and having the time to learn it? It makes me laugh that you have 20-year-old, kids in their 20s going, I don't have time for that. Where in our office, we've been playing with GPT, so I feel pretty good about us older people doing that. But that there's an employer also responsibility in that, I think.
Yeah, I hesitate to tell employers what to do because I think that when you're trying to meet a bottom line, that's your priority, right? So you have to focus on what you've got to focus on. You've got shareholders, or you've got a board, or you've got a payroll to meet, whatever it is, that is the thing that's going to dominate your thinking. I think that that's part one. I think part two of this is that I think there are some perverse incentives in the system not to train, right? If I'm an employer, I train somebody, I have automatically increased their market value, then they can go somewhere else. So we need to figure out some ways of dealing with that so that employers, it's worth it to them to not see their investment walk out the door. I think the second thing, and this is related to that, but the tax code treats investments in human capital quite different than it treats investment in plant and equipment, right? So you get a much more favorable tax treatment from the federal government for money that you spend on plant and equipment compared to what you do on the human capital side. I'm not advocating to raise anybody's taxes, right? What I'm suggesting is that those should be equalized, and maybe it's a matter of increasing the tax benefit for human capital investments rather than trying to cut the tax benefit for plant and equipment. But it needs to be equalized in large part because you've got this massive influx of AI coming, right? There's already huge incentive in the system to automate and to replace human labor with machine labor. We don't need to make it happen any faster than it's going to happen. It's going to happen regardless because there's so much benefit to businesses and to the economy more broadly to do it, right? So maybe we need to look at ways of kind of equalizing this so that employers are making a decision not based on the tax benefit, but when I look at the totality of my business, what's the best thing? Is it better in this instance to automate, or should I just upskill? Should I find ways of integrating human and machine labor that can actually keep people in their jobs and increase productivity?
Great. So supporter worker practices and policies alone just won't take care of it, in your opinion? Supporter employer practices?
No, again, employers are not social service agencies, right? They're not there, that is not their mission to deal with non-work related problems and challenges. They have a role in it, and they certainly see themselves as impacted by it, but we need, I think, a greater sense of ownership of these problems by the community as a whole, and not just looking to either employers or to schools. They're going to fix these problems that are standing between people and their jobs and being able to retain employment. So no, I think that employers can make a difference, but employers are juggling a lot in a competitive economy already.
Thanks. Lisa, this question's to you. Barriers related to transportation, childcare, and mental health often cause program participants to exit training programs early. Beyond adding new training options for potential workforce gains, how should we support candidates to ensure success?
I think that the workforce system isn't alone. I think, as you were saying, right, it's a community. These are community issues that we need to solve as a community. So, and employers are part of that community. But I agree that they need to be solved as a community. And we've seen many of these issues were here before COVID, right? And we've said this time and again. COVID ripped off Band-Aids that we had to make some of these problems and these challenges for workers, for some workers better, but not for all workers. And so now that those Band-Aids are off, it's in our face. So if childcare is one of those, we need to be looking at innovation in a business model that's difficult, right? For parents to be able to work and to pay for childcare, quality childcare, is expensive, and childcare workers are already paid very low. And so to say, well, we need to pay more for childcare, for when parents can hardly afford it as it is, even those who are making a good wage, and I remember those days, they weren't that far back. And then, that doesn't, maybe that would generate more money to pay childcare workers, but then you would have more people being unable to afford it. But then you have childcare workers who are on benefits, benefit eligible because they're not making enough money. So I think these problems, if we really want everybody to work, who wants to work, who can work, to realize, their own potential, then as a community, we've got to figure out how to solve these transportation and childcare problems altogether. So.
Yeah, I can't add a lot to that. I mean, it's always the big three, childcare, housing, and transportation are the things that are the most common barriers for workers. I mean, one thought to add on to this is that communities can't wait for the federal government or the state government to solve the problem. The community has to solve the problem. Get started solving these problems. And there are some great nonprofit groups out there that do work with employers, coalitions of employers, that really get into the weeds of, here's the problem that we as a business are facing, or our workers are facing, in terms of being able to remain engaged in the workforce. There's a lot of workers over here and a lot of jobs over here and no transportation to connect the two. Well, these kind of organizations kind of go in and convene the conversation between the businesses and the public transit to solve those kinds of very fine-grained challenges that a group of workers and a business have. That's the kind of work that will sort of slowly work the knots, I think, out of the system.
So what I think we're saying too is, so we have hidden workers in plain sight.
Mm-hmm. They're not hiding.
Yeah,
right?
they are not hiding. We just have not worked together to get them to where they need to go and where they can be seen and hired.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you. Kind of piggybacking off of that on the public policy side, 90% of federal funding for education, over $25 billion, goes to four-year degree programs, when four-year degrees are not promised or a fast track to a good paying job. Should workforce programs and funding be a higher priority?
So this is one of the most contentious topics around education and workforce is, are we sending too many people to college? I don't see how you can look at what's happening and reach any other conclusion. We are sending too many people to college because about half of the ones that do go don't complete, and they leave with a boatload of debt without a degree. And the studies show that all of the economic value of a 4-year degree is in the last year, right? It doesn't count from an employer's perspective if you have 3 years of college education. If you don't have that 4th year, the question is why? Why didn't you persist? And employers are looking for workers who will persist. That's really the value of the degree, is that it signals to the employer that the student can successfully transition into the workforce or has a higher probability. So yes, we're sending too many people onto 4-year degrees, and we're creating a lot of debt and disappointment in that process. We need more flexible career pathways that allow and encourage people to follow what they think is the best path for them. Because for the last 30 years, the answer has been get a degree, right? And now the answer is go to community college. And so the pendulum swings back and forth, and you never know what the right answer is for any one individual. And I'm a big believer in the need to reinvest in career guidance and counseling, and to help students parse all of the options that they have and try to find something that will be sustainable for them, rather than, I just don't want to think about this. When we say go to college or don't go to college, we're really saying is we don't want to think about you. And we really need to be much more thoughtful about engaging our students in a plan for their future, rather than just, some sort of one-size-fits-all prescription.
Understood. Lisa, any thoughts?
Well, I think I'm going to be disingenuous and say yes, there should be more federal funding because we're federally funded with the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And a lot of that money is spent on career advising, helping people understand what they really are good at. Our job center operator, Scott Johnson, who's not here today, but he often says people come in and they say, I want a job, I need a job. And he says, no, you don't need a job. There's where do you live? What do you want to do? How much money do you want to make? What are your interests? What are your skills? What kind of training do you need? It's not, I need a job. And we need to do a better job of making sure first of all, you are so right, every kid graduates from high school already with a plan. No child should be leaving the K-12 system without a plan for what they want to do and how they can get there, what are potential ways to fund it, what's going to work based on what they want to do. And instead, we let them graduate, and either they go to college because it's expected, and that wasn't really the right step for them. They may go to community college, and that can be a good step, but if they still don't know what the path is, that's not going to be helpful. And maybe they have a vague idea of what it is they want to do, but they don't know how to get there, so they're out there right now, and we deal with this daily, the 19 to 24-year-olds who are working a job and having needs met, whatever those needs are in the short term, not knowing until they get a little bit older, oh gosh, this isn't going to finance me for the rest of it, and this isn't what I want to do. Now where do I go to get that same career advice and that same plan? And I do think that, sure, I'd always like to see more federal funding in the programs that we have. We're one of the only organizations who has money to invest in training for people. But even that is only, $1.5 million, and believe me, that doesn't go far, right? It sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't go far. And so our ability to help those people get those skills and invest in that training, even if it's not just training, if it's going on to a 2 or a 4 year, because we also help pay for some of that, we need to have the money to invest. So.
And let me, because I didn't answer that part of the question, the value of the federal workforce development block grant that goes out to the states, the value of that money has declined by about 90% over the last 30 years. So it doesn't get increased, and states are basically dealing with a dwindling resource because inflation and other costs are eating the value of it. So only Japan spends less money on its workforce development programs than the United States among the developed countries. We are number 2 at the bottom of that. It's remarkable how little as a percentage of GDP we're putting into training and supporting our workers. So, it's not, money isn't the answer, but it does help, and particularly if the money is well targeted, and that's what I think we need to really have the hard conversation about. The research and evaluation on workforce development programs, you have to look really hard to find measurable positive outcomes. That's not to say they aren't doing anything. I don't think that's the case, but we don't see huge returns. We're not putting much in, so why would we? But we don't see it. Where we do see returns, though, are in things like job counseling. Going back to that career counseling, career development, help me think about my training and my work, that actually does produce results. It helps workers get to the next step. And so when we think about adding money to the system, we should be thinking about adding it to things that we know can make a difference. The other thing that makes a difference is sector-based employment training strategies, which has a huge component of career guidance and counseling. So you're going to hear that thought from me over and over again. Like, we do not spend enough time and energy and money on engaging people about what they want to do with their lives.
Right.
Thank you. So it's 12:35.
Okay.
And Doug is putting his finger up. But we'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audience in a few minutes. If you have a question, please make your way to the microphone now. If you're watching online, please type your question into the chat. Before we take an audience question, I have one final question for both of you. I'll start with Lisa. Lisa, what specific programs in Central Ohio do you think have been most effective in helping populations of color re-enter the workforce? Are there programs in Central Ohio that could serve as models for other parts of the state or vice versa?
I'm going to actually hold up a program that the board itself does not sponsor, but that we like to support, and that's Building Futures. That's a pre-apprenticeship program. Franklin County is one of the primary funders of it. I believe the city of Columbus now is also funding it. And what it does is it's helping people who traditionally have not gone into construction, and we all know there's a lot of construction going on in Central Ohio, and the need for people to work in the trades is very big. And at this point, too, if you decide to go into the trades, you could be working in Central Ohio your entire career. You're not necessarily going to have to go to other parts of the state or even other parts of the country, just because of the amount of building that's going on here. And so what that has done, what it's doing is it's bringing cohorts of people into their program, doing a pre-apprenticeship training, and then people who successfully complete that are able then to matriculate directly into the registered apprenticeships. So you name it, plumbing, electric, labor, all of the things it takes to build. It's been very, very successful. They'd have several cohorts go through now for, gosh, I think we're on maybe year 4 or 5. And I think that those kinds of things pre-apprenticeships that matriculate into real career pathways are strategies that I know the board just had a presentation on this morning, and we're doing with our own apprenticeship hub, but also in programs like Building Futures are very promising and replicable. So I would call that one out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. Doug Buchanan with CMC is curating questions from our live stream audience.
Archie, thank you very much, and thank you, Brent, and thank you, Lisa, as well. Question to launch us off, and if you do have a question, please do join me here at the microphone. Aaliyah Bradley mentioned in her opening remarks that 1 in 3 Americans has been involved in the criminal justice system. Can you talk about the connection between criminal justice reform in America and the workforce participation rate?
There's no doubt about it that, I mean, we have seen a significant amount of reform with things like ban the box campaigns, so people don't, automatically take themselves out of contention for a job because they have to check the box that said, I have committed a felony. I think one useful reform would be to stop sending so many people to prison who don't need to be in prison. And if you don't have the record, then it's not going to be a problem. So we need to think about other kinds of programs that can divert people away, and so they never acquire the record. People who are in prison, have been in prison, criminal justice reform is another area that I work on at AEI, but what we do is we take people who are already troubled and we put them in prison, and those are terrible environments to begin unraveling challenges, and then they get to the end of their sentences and they're back in the same neighborhoods, same communities, same friend groups, and we expect that somehow it's going to be different, and that is illogical. So we need a different way, I think, of processing people through the system that enhances their chance of success afterwards. Again, it's not unlike workforce development programs. We just don't know what those things are. There's very little in the research that we could say, yeah, go do that, go implement this program, because this program really, turns things around. We've tried a lot of different approaches, and they just haven't worked. So again, I think what we need is innovation in this space, and that's what we should be funding, is people to go out and try new things, evaluate them, and figure out how to remediate the challenges of people with criminal records.
Jane Scott. The immigration process and getting a green card or work permit is extraordinarily difficult and very expensive. As an intermediary, does the Workforce Development Board have a role in helping legal immigrants facilitate this process and get through the immigration process to get their work permits? It can take 5 to 7 years and tens of thousands of dollars. And people who are very skilled and very willing to work can't get work permits.
Well, thank you for that question. As a newly minted mother-in-law to a British citizen who will soon complete his master's in computer science and AI, this is now a lot nearer and dearer to my heart than it may have been. But I can tell you that we see many new immigrants and refugees coming in with degrees in areas where we desperately need people to work, and because their education and training is not necessarily recognized, and one might question whether, for what reason, for some of them, not all of them, this is a source of talent that we are leaving behind, and shame on us for doing that. We're a nation of immigrants. So do we have a role in that? We don't have necessarily within the board the expertise, but we do have partners. We know where to send people to help them. And if people, we are able to help people. If a person is legal to work in the United States and they're in the process, we are able to help them. And what we try to do is look at what is their experience. And even if, so for example, if you have somebody who has some kind of a medical certification that is not recognized here, that doesn't mean that we can't help them to get back into that sector, at least initially, to use the knowledge that they have, and then look at how do we help you recreate the certification you may already have. So it is a source of talent, especially here in Central Ohio too, where we are a magnet for immigration and refugees because they see what's all the opportunity here, right? It is on us to try to figure out how to get them into our workforce and benefit from what they know.
Thank you. Question, what would be the impact of higher minimum wages on workforce participation? Would a higher minimum wage encourage more people to re-enter the workforce, or would it result in just fewer jobs overall?
Yeah, I don't think there is an example in the history of economics where if you raise the price of something, you get more of it. If you raise the price of employment, you're not going to get more employment. Some of the research goes back and forth on this question as to the degree to which it might slow, but there's very little research to suggest that that you increase the amount of employment by increasing the cost of employment. So we have to be very, very cautious, I think, around minimum wages, and particularly, again, it sounds great, but it ends up hurting the very people who need that first job, right? If you make it too expensive to employ them, they won't get employed. And it is another way of sort of government putting its foot on the gas pedal around automation. If you've been to McDonald's lately, you've seen, what the combination of new technology and higher wages is doing. It's eliminating a lot of entry-level positions.
I think we got to think about what would the minimum wage have to be. Here in Columbus, the minimum wage would have to be north of $26 an hour in order for a single person with maybe a child or two to actually be able to afford their housing, afford their transportation, afford their childcare. Right now, any minimum wage that gets set, we see those wages are well in advance of that because of the competition for workers. So the jobs that we promote at the Job Center, the lowest are going to be somewhere around 18, maybe, and most of them are north of 20 to 22 now. So where at a time I might have actually said we needed a minimum wage right now, a minimum wage of 15 would not even, that's not even it. The minimum wage already is 18, 19, 20. And if you really want to address everybody's needs, somebody's individual needs, they need to be making north of 26.
Okay, hi, I'm Laura Fish with Applegate Talent Strategies, and I really love your term cognitive flexibility. That resonates with me, that is what's needed today. And I hear that we're doing a lot of work in the workforce side of things, helping shape people up to how they need to be and helping them to be flexible. But on the employer side, I think that they need that cognitive flexibility as well, the organization and every leader. My question is, we know that 70% of the difference between why somebody stays or leaves their job is how much they trust their boss, the relationship they have with them, according to Gallup studies year after year, thousands and thousands of people. what could be our investment in that first line leader so that they have that cognitive flexibility to be more successful with retaining and advancing people once they get to their company, to help them to stay employed and to inspire others to do so?
So, a great question. So it's interesting that when we talk about job training, we're always talking about workers, you know. Like, workers need skills, workers need to change, and workers. Accenture just put out a study this week talking about the urgent need to upskill CEOs because they are struggling with, because of these cognitive flexibility issues. These are mainly people in their middle age. They're really struggling with, I don't even know how to incorporate artificial intelligence into my business processes. And I have to understand something about it if I'm going to lead my organization through this transition. So this all fits with what I said earlier about how AI hits at the top of the skill distribution more than at the bottom. And so I'm hopeful that as that phenomenon makes itself more felt, that our CEOs and frontline managers, it's no longer going to be just about, upskilling is something that somebody else needs to do. Upskilling is actually something that I'm going to have to do. And that, I hope, will create some empathy between leaders of organizations and their workers, because we're kind of all in the same boat on this. So that's a long way of saying I don't know how to tell people how to do this. I can just say you really ought to think about it, and you ought to be, organizations need to think about themselves from top to bottom and not just, the worker bees that they're trying to attract into the company.
The other thing I would add is that, something that we think about at the board too is culture, and helping employers understand the culture of their workforce. How are they? Is it a welcoming environment? Is it a place somebody wants to get up to and go to? And, one of the initiatives that we have is we've partnered with the Columbus Chamber to do what we call next level DEIA, or as we call it within our office, the DEIA incubator, which is really focused on how do we help mid-size employers who don't even really have an HR department, or the HR department is the owner or the owner's family, is how do we talk about how do you improve your culture overall so that you are able to attract a diverse talent pipeline, and people want to stay there once they get there. And when there's competition for people, you can't come to me and say, people aren't working, they don't want to work for me. No, they don't want to work for you, and you need to look at why that is. Not that, they're sitting at home on the couch saying, I just don't feel like working for anybody today. So, I think that's another piece of that. And that certainly goes from top to bottom, CEO, first line, anybody who's interacting with anybody in an organization, so.
Just to amplify on that point a little bit, we've just published a survey last week looking at what workers say they value in the workplace, and salary comes in at about fourth, and at the very top of the list is flexibility. Workers want flexibility. When you peel that onion back just a little bit further, you find out that for younger workers, a welcoming working environment is like one of their top priorities. Now, what does that, you got to figure out what that means, but we've got a number of populations that struggle with getting integrated into the workforce. That's certainly been true for women. It's been true for minorities over the years. I think one of the groups that's struggling with workforce integration right now is men. I think that the change in the job market, types of jobs that are being done that are needed to be filled are not jobs that men historically have been that prevalent in. And so there's a welcoming issue, as it were, for them as well. And I think that's a good thing to recognize, that when we talk about creating an inclusive workforce, we mean inclusive, everyone. And one of the groups that's out right now is men.
Thank you. I think we have just a couple of minutes left, about 3 minutes left. We'll try to get to both our remaining in-person questions.
Hello, I'm Kyle Otterhahn. I have a question for Mr. Orell today. So I got caught up on you mentioning that employers are not social service agencies. And I guess I want to sort of challenge that and question that, because we see that executives can certainly get compensation packages that include legal services, wellness services. White collar workers get relocation assistance and other family assistance. So why can't we see social services as a part of employee benefits and total compensation for workers who are at the margin at the lowest level?
Yeah, so I guess I would respond to that by saying that I do think there's a lot more that we should be doing for workers, particularly workers caught in employment transitions. We totally missed the boat on this with robotics, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and we didn't have anything for them. We had a trade adjustment assistance program, but most people who lost their jobs didn't qualify for that. So I think there's more that we can do as a society. In reference to CEO compensation and benefits, that is actually being set by the boards of the companies, right? And they're out there trying to bid for CEOs, and this is what it takes to attract that talent, or at least that's what they believe it takes to attract that talent. So unless and until our labor markets get so tight that employers say, I'm going to have to invest in this in order to get the talent in the door, it's probably not going to happen. And that's a function of how markets work. So I'm not in favor of mandating that employers do that. Like I said, I think employers have a lot that they have to juggle. We depend upon them. I depend on my employer. Everybody here depends on an employer to pay their salary. I don't want to see my business, my company, go out of business because the mandate costs get so high that they can't afford to function.
Thank you. We have about a minute left for one final quick question.
Oh, high pressure. Natalie Sisto with Accenture. Though asking a question, yeah, I see the chuckle, Brent. Asking the question as a proud disability mom, my question would be, in this labor market, what are you most excited about for opportunities for people with disabilities?
Wow, what a great question. My son is disabled, has autism, and I think one of the things that I am most excited about for him is how I think AI can help people with cognitive disabilities. We're already seeing this on the job of chatbots acting as kind of moment-to-moment job coaches and really increasing job satisfaction, productivity. Everybody's winning, and it's been one of the most startling unexpected to me that we would see such a benefit for workers who have either disabilities or just lower levels of skill that can really be lifted up through these electronic coaches, so that's one of the things that I'm most excited about.
I think what I'm most excited about is that when things get tighter, people start to think about doing what they wouldn't do before. And they're pretty soon going to find out that what they wouldn't do before was kind of dumb, because now they're doing it. And I remember when, so I teach a class at Ohio State, and it's a management and leadership in the public sector. And one of the things we talked about is, as soon as COVID hit and everybody had to pivot to working from home, we talked about who are the people who would be good consultants to people who now are working at home. And we came up with, well, people who are working from home because they have disabilities that may prevent them from easily getting to the workplace, they've been doing it for a while, and so they would be good consultants to everybody else. And also, I think that for some employers where that does make sense, now they start to see, well, wait, I have these people who used to work with me are working at home, even if it's just a day or two. So there's no reason why, if I have this person with a lot of talent, I can't set them up to be able to also work from home. And so I think things happen. We talk about, in public policy, punctuated equilibrium, where, right, everything goes along, and it goes along, and there's incremental change, and then boom, something happens. And all of a sudden, what we didn't think could change, changes. And everybody walks around saying, wow, why didn't we do that sooner? And I think that's what's happened, and it affects people who maybe have some kind of disability as well.
Well, everyone, I wish we had more time, but I'm getting the wrap-up signal from Doug. So I'll turn over to Mr. Buchanan for concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone found today's forum inspirational and useful. I know I need to upskill myself on ChatGPT, or else I'm going to be in line with Lisa here soon. I want to thank today's sponsors, J.P. Morgan Chase, Charter Communications, and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to our beautiful venue, the Ellis, for its support. We also want to thank our virtual seat patrons and the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream. A very special appreciation to today's speaker, Brent Orrell, Lisa Pat McDaniel, and our host, Archie Williamson. Let's have a hand for them. Please make plans now to attend next week's evening forum. It's a new era for Columbus art museums. It will be right here at the Ellis, but the doors will open at 4 p.m. for a 4 to 5:30 chat with the new leaders of the Columbus Museum of Art and the Wexner Center for the Arts. Hope to see you then. Have a great afternoon, everybody.